Good morning, friends at SUU. Tony Pellegrini here with our Teaching and Learning at Southern Utah University podcast. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to connect with you and to share some of our great teachers here at Southern Utah University. Our guest today is one of those great ones, Lisa Arter from the English department here at Southern Utah University. Lisa, would you be willing to take a moment or two, introduce yourself, tell us a little about Lisa Arter?
I'd be happy to, Tony. Thank you. This is my 25th year of teaching overall and my 10th year at Southern Utah. I've taught in some capacity at just about every grade level, elementary, secondary, college, graduate, adult, everything, at every type of community college, undergrad, research institute, everything, and all sorts of modalities. After last year of face-to-face, synchronous and asynchronous all at the same time, I'm hoping that they don't come up with another modality for a little bit. Let me get used to some of the ones we have already. I have a bachelor's in English Ed, a master's in literature with a concentration in mythology, and then my PhD is curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in English education.
How exciting. Your learners really do benefit from the learning that you've acquired and that you're able to share with them and encourage them. I was particularly impressed, Lisa, with your wide variety of instruction across different entities. And so I think that a lot of those, I'm thinking back to elementary and middle school and high school, those are real world situations. Not that college isn't, but what are some of the things that you do to help your learners connect your lessons to real world experiences that they have? Would you be able to share with us some of the things that you do associated with that?
Sure. Each of my classes, and I have 5 English education methods classes, which I have fought for, and I absolutely love having them all. They have real classroom practicum components built into them. So at the 2000 level classes for methods of grammar and methods of writing, we go into elementary schools. Even though most of my students are secondary, I like starting them with the 3rd and the 5th graders because that's really where the standards for writing and grammar begin. And it gives my students a chance to get some teaching classroom experience under their belt without it quite being high school, middle school scary yet. And for one of the classes, they co-plan, co-teach, and co-assess lessons. And when they're not upfront teaching, they provide small group support and get practice implementing other teachers' lesson plans. And then for methods of teaching writing, the focus for those practicums is to individually instruct a small group over several weeks. And there they learn some real world differentiating for needs and abilities, as well as how different the same kid can be from one moment to the next, and how they just love to throw curveballs at you. You got to get pretty good at teaching at hitting those back.
You absolutely do. And what you made me think of as you were visiting there and sharing was the complexity. Yes, with all your degrees, all of your experiences, boy, you really can deal with that complexity. But how do you reach out to your learners with those complex activities to check for their understanding, to make sure that they're on track and they're really conceptualizing or seeing the picture that you are painting? What is it that you do to check for student understanding of what you're teaching?
Since I get to work with future teachers, I like the modeling approach. I use it a lot in teaching. And so in my methods classes, I try to explain that how I'm teaching is a type of metacognition teaching, where I'm trying to make what I'm thinking as a teacher visible to my students. And so there are days when we're talking about lesson planning, they're learning to lesson plan, that I bring in lesson plans for things I've taught them, or I will lesson plan that day's lesson in front of them as they go along. I use Lemov's field guide in my classes. He's a wonderful practitioner and researcher. And so they work their way through his 63 techniques for fabulous teaching. And they read about a technique, and then we talk about it, and I model it, and we talk about it some more, and they practice modeling it with their peers so that they can see me do it and talk about it. But then as they're actually pretending to be a teacher in a classroom when they're with their peers, I can give them live feedback. Okay, this is great, or you need to stand here, or you ignored that part of the classroom. And then when I go into the classrooms, where they're with the kids, we do afterwards, I give them feedback on, what I saw. And then the classroom teachers, the practicum teachers, also provide feedback. And so it's as close to, trying to make it a lab experience as possible. And I am big on formative assessment. I don't want to wait till the end of a unit or the end of the semester to point out what was going well and what was going wrong. So it's just this constant conversation of feedback is really how I assess my students.
Well, that formative approach is so practical and applicable to making things happen, and to be into modeling for your students as well. You're constantly assessing. We live in glass house. We live in glass houses. It's okay if I'm watching you, and it's okay if you make a mistake or two. That's how we learn. We learn from those, and we can improve from those. Lisa, let me kind of change the topic just a little bit. Today we had the wonderful opportunity of having Provost Anderson and his team in our department. It was a wonderful opportunity to listen to his perspectives, but again, to be able to allow him to listen to us as far as the wonderful opportunities that we have to teach here at SUU. And I was particularly touched and want to ask with his question to us, and wanted to share that same question with you. What is it that you really love about teaching at SUU? Would you be willing to share that with us?
Always. That's one of my favorite questions because it's so easy to answer. I was drawn to SUU because it's a teaching-centric university, but the department, the program I'm in is still small enough where across those 5 methods classes that I don't really have to share with anyone, I get to teach them. I get to teach the same students, my core group of students, throughout the semesters across all the years. So I get to meet them when they're 18-year-old freshmen who want to be teachers and are full of idealism and passion, and they think they already have all of the answers. And it's so energetic and wonderful. And then across the course of 4 years, I see them over and over, and I see them developing their own teacher persona and really understanding, the combination of content and pedagogy and what works for them and their style and their own students, and really building into a teacher that 4 years later, after I've signed off their last paperwork as student teaching, I get to send them a letter that welcomes them as my colleague. And I absolutely love the fact that I get to work in a place where I get to really know my students, and they get to know and trust me. And then I get to talk to them for the next 10, 20, 30 years because they are my colleagues.
And that learning is really a two-way street. And
it is.
You can learn as well. Boy, I don't know if we call it professional development, but learning from our learners, what a wonderful way to add value to this world. I really do appreciate that about you. I want to change tax just a little bit, and I can't even imagine that you have this situation, but I'm going to ask it. Certainly, to see your growth of your learners over 2, 3, 4 years is powerful and profound, and to lift and encourage your learners like you do is wonderful. But along the way, do you ever bump into a reluctant learner? Do you give up on them right away? What do you do if you get someone that's maybe a little reluctant to follow your directions, but you do see that skill or that attitude or disposition to be good teachers in them? What are some things you do?
I have run into that. It doesn't throw me now as much as it did in the beginning. Maybe because I have better answers for them, or maybe because I have a little more confidence myself. But when I have a student who, and I have had students who aren't just, who are reluctant to learn, up to flat out, trying to contradict what I'm saying and suggesting that they do as teachers and telling me, no, it wouldn't work that way. I ask them, well, what's their idea? How would they do it in the classroom? And then try to set up a scenario where they have the opportunity to actually put that into play. I do a lot of role playing in my classrooms, and a lot of, okay, well, let's talk this out and work this out and see if we can get something to its logical end, its logical conclusion, and see if that really does work for you. And so I think that, again, that conversation with them, trying to find out why they're reluctant, what is it that tends to be throwing up a wall between that. In some ways, it's much easier at the college level because they have a bit more experience and a bit more vocabulary to really be able to explain it. When I taught middle school, sometimes they didn't know why they were reluctant. It just kind of came down to, I don't like school. And I don't really see that at the college level. And I think that having a conversation with a reluctant learner to try to determine what is the source of that reluctance, and then finding an interest to get them to engage in what's going on in the classroom, particularly at the college level. If you're in my class, you chose to be there. So there's got to be a reason. There's got to be something in it that can connect with you, or you wouldn't be here. And so I just think at the college level, it's so much easier. At the K-12 level, they're there because they have to be there. But still having a conversation and finding something in your content that can engage them. And it overcomes that reluctance. Once you know what it is, you can decide how to go about defeating it.
Well, and that's one thing I really love about you, your knowledge of your learners, going that extra mile to learn about them, to dig deep, to understand where they're coming from is so critical for you. Again, a formative assessment, but critical for you to be able to nurture and guide and suggest ways for them to be better. I've seen that in you, and I really do appreciate that. I've got another question for you just before we wrap up here. You've mentioned, the work that you do to, increase the students' vocabulary regarding instructional tools. Maybe it's scaffolding that you're sharing, or maybe it's think, pair, share that you're working with them on. What are some of the learning activities that you do to help your learners acquire those concepts that you share in class that maybe are new or innovative to your learners?
I like an active and engaged classroom. And so I think in some ways with teaching, it's even easier because you get to be very almost painfully obvious about the activity you're doing. And so sometimes I'll just announce, hey, we're going to do a think, pair, share. And then I'll explain what that is. But then I have my students do it. I think it's very important, particularly with pre-service teachers, that you don't just explain the pedagogy, you have them participate in it. And so I will give them a very, very simple piece of content or a concept. And I tell them it's not because I think that you don't already know, the parts of speech or something very basic, but I want your cognitive energy to focus on the pedagogy right now, not the content, so that when you're a teacher and you are implementing this with your students, you feel confident doing that. So I, am constantly reading and researching and new pedagogy and stuff. And when I find something, I'll bring articles in to my class and we'll read it and we'll talk about it. But I try to always have them do the activity the article is talking about. So one of my favorite recent things to do with my students is called a graffiti wall, where, and I'm sure you already know this one, Tony, but for anybody who might be listening who doesn't, you make a copy of the article or whatever text you want them to read. You put it in the middle of a big piece of butcher paper or some larger paper, and you give them each markers, and they annotate as a small group together and write questions and answers. And so it's a written conversation of the thought process they all had while they were reading about this. And I first did that when I read an article about graffiti walls. So most of my teaching activities really are, hey, here's something that works for students. I'm going to have you do it so that you have that confidence of how to do it. And then we always debrief on, okay, what did you learn through this experience?
This podcast is totally about you, Lisa, but I have to just share one personal story just really quickly.
Yes.
When my third daughter was 3 years old, my wife took the others and went and did something. She goes, "You were to paint this bedroom, Tony, and keep Tessa active." And so I'm painting, and you try painting with a 3-year-old. It's a tough row to hoe. Anyway, so I'm painting, and so little Tessa, of course, comes over and she goes, "Hey, Dad, let me paint, let me help." And I go, why don't you watch? Why don't you watch and have good thoughts for Dad? Watching and good thoughts is really helpful. And she looked at me, put her hands on her hips, and she said, "Watching is not helping, Dad. Doing is helping." And, it stuck with me throughout my life. It's what we do. We've got to have that belief in ourselves, the belief in that we can make this happen. Are we going to make a mistake along the way? Absolutely. But doing is so much more helpful than just good thoughts.
I absolutely agree. And I agree what you said about mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. And I encourage my pre-service teachers to make mistakes in our classrooms together. I said, this is the safest place for you to make your teaching goofs, because we're all learning together, and I can fix it. Whatever falls apart or breaks, or, if the wheels come off the car, train falls off the tracks, whatever metaphor you want to use, we can fix it in here. It's a lot harder for me to help you when you're in your own classroom somewhere else in the country. So be brave and jump in and make mistakes here where we can fix them and learn from them.
Lisa, I love your vision. I love your perspective. We've got to wrap this up, but I want to give you one last opportunity. Words of wisdom for students, for teachers here. Give us a couple words of wisdom from Lisa Arter, would you please?
Be fearless. Just try. Experience everything you can. Every week my students have to write a reflection, and one of the questions they have to answer every week is, what did you do this week that tested your comfort zone? Because teaching will test your comfort zone like nothing else. And you're supposed to embrace that. So honestly, just if you see in your pedagogy, if you read a new piece of content, if you've never tried it before, be fearless. Take it into your classroom and just try it. Yes, you might fall, but darling, you might fly.
And it is worth the effort to do that. Lisa, thank you so much for taking a few minutes with me. I sure appreciate you. You're a gracious friend, and I'm just grateful for the learning that I've been able to acquire listening to you. You make it a great year. Keep doing the wonderful things that you're doing, and keep lifting our learners, okay?
Thanks, Tony.
Have a great day. Thank you so much, Lisa. Bye-bye now.
Bye.